I'm Amanda Cassett, and this is Endgame. In this episode, I spoke with Ameen Soleimani, an Ethereum builder and longtime friend. Ameen's work from MolochDAO and SpankChain to Tornado Cash and now Oxbow is always at the cutting edge of privacy and decentralization. We talked honestly about the future of Ethereum, the values at stake, and how privacy can coexist with growing regulation. Here's our conversation. Hey, Ameen. Thanks for jumping on and chatting with me today.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me.
I want to just dive right into it. Is Ethereum headed in the right direction?
Great question. It depends on what you think the right direction is. And when I got into this, I think I was a little bit more ideological than I happen to be right now. Actually, I was thinking about what radicalized me. And your talk in Germany helped radicalize me. Do you remember your talk?
I do.
So in your talk, you talked about what we tried to achieve and what we achieved. And you explained how one of our greatest successes thus far is exporting the dollar dominance around the world. And I think that that was a very honest take about what blockchains, besides Bitcoin, have achieved. And so if in that light, it's very helpful. For example, I'm Iranian. I care about the cause of Iranian people. Access to tethers is a huge upgrade for anybody in Iran who, women who are protesting, they get their bank account shut down if they get caught running around without a hijab, promoting the woman life freedom movement. And so for them, having access to cryptocurrency powered dollars is fantastic. And so in that light, blockchains are delivering on the value that we, sitting here in America might think is like a luxury thing. Oh, what difference does it make? This is a centralized thing, but for them, it's meaningfully important. I think the problem that I sort of try to point out is that we have stopped being as intellectually honest as I at least thought we were. And I would like to get back to some of that. And I think your talk helped point out, help set that straight and get us on that path and open my eyes to, the difference between our sort of buzzwords, and then what actually people find valuable.
So if we were intellectually honest as a space, what would our evaluation be of Ethereum and how we've done?
Well, we've created some cool financial tools. DeFi is pretty great. I use it, all my friends use it, family uses it. It provides access to interest rates that you might not be able to get in banks, or at least more transparently. I can go read the code for Aave. I sort of know what's going on. I can understand that there's collaterals. I can choose between different systems. And I think that's powerful. I really like DAOs, the ability to have coordination on Ethereum. That was sort of part of what drove me into this. Was being able to have global coordination systems. So I think that in that sense, Ethereum has delivered. But I think that a lot of our, buzzwords, decentralization, credible neutrality, permissionlessness, they sound nice, but they may not be what we want. For example, Tornado Cash, right? Permissionless, immutable, and to its credit, still around. But unfortunately, North Korea was one of the power users of it. As a result of that, there's a lot of legal proceedings. There's a whole case around do Americans, can we even use it? It got sanctioned, it got unsanctioned. So there's forces that clarify, what the limits of free speech are and privacy in America, which I think is great. But I didn't get into crypto to build tools for North Korea. And so being able to make tools that might have some amount of permission might help me achieve those goals better. Yeah, we kind of need to be looking at the outcomes of the experiments that we're running and then updating, and not sort of clinging on to the ideologies that we went in with.
Well, I think Tornado Cash is a great example of a kind of product that perfectly encapsulates the vision of what inspired me getting into the Ethereum space, right? The idea that you would be able to send value from one place to another privately. Very exciting. And I mean, a lot of people would say that it was wrong to prosecute people for creating that. And there's also some great data, even from Chainalysis, about how the amount of money laundering, illegal activity in crypto is actually really tiny, especially compared to cash, especially compared to traditional banks, which are constantly paying penalties for, assisting cartels or whatever they end up getting caught for. What would you say to people in the space that want our space to have more things like Tornado Cash?
It's a tricky one. So, to be clear, Tornado Cash, I was part of MolochDAO. MolochDAO helped give all the grants to Tornado Cash initially. This is our MolochDAO shirt. We then helped fund the legal defense for Alexei and Roman. I was at Alexei's trial in the Netherlands. I do not think they should be prosecuted. I think you're absolutely correct. That holding the developers accountable for this is egregious, and it goes far beyond what is typical of the law in other cases. Banks do money laundering for Mexican drug cartels. HSBC laundered hundreds of millions of dollars, and they were basically fined. And so the difference in the legal action with that and something like Tornado Cash, where they actually had no ability to stop any of the transactions going in, is not great. And so I'm hoping the best outcome for Roman and for Alexei, and I do not want the precedent that privacy devs should be held legally accountable for the crimes of their users. That said, unfortunately, privacy is something that, especially when it comes to money, is something that is socially derived, right? If I'm just using encryption, right, end-to-end encryption, you and I can keep secrets, and I don't need anybody else to be using encryption tools to get the benefit of having secrets. But when it comes to private money systems, if I'm the only one who uses a private money system, it's pretty obvious who I am. And so the quality of my anonymity set matters in addition to the quantity. And so that's why now I'm working.
What do you mean? What do you mean quantity versus quality with anonymity?
Sure, I would prefer, for example, to not be in an anonymity set that includes North Korea or DeFi hackers or the IRGC of Iran, and because everybody who's participating in the anonymity set is essentially exchanging privacy with one another. I'm giving you privacy, you're giving me privacy. When it comes to determining whether or not these systems end up being allowed and integrated into real world, if Coinbase, for example, will accept your money that comes out of something like a Tornado Cash, they're going to be looking at who goes into something like Tornado Cash. And so it matters who's in your anonymity set. And for me, I would prefer not to have that association. And so that's why I'm now working on Oxbow. So Oxbow is sort of our taglines like Tornado Cash, but without the terrorist. I was going around ETH Denver.
You always have the best taglines, the best marketing in the space, really out there.
We were going around ETH Denver KYCing people. We'd roll up and say, "Hey, say Kim Jong-un sucks," and then we would accept them onto our KYC.
Is that the
whitelist.
KYC? And you just say Kim Jong-un sucks and you're KYC'd on your platform?
You also happen to be ETH Denver, and I know who you are, and it doesn't
social
require. Yeah, exactly. But we're still doing transaction screening, and so Oxbow is launching a thing called privacy pools. Oxbow operates a whitelist, and so we do transaction screening on all the transactions that go into the pool, and we only accept onto the whitelist the deposits that pass our transaction screening. And if we find out that we, for some reason, made a mistake or we learned some information about one of the deposits later, we can kick them off the whitelist. And it's not a custodial system because, all the users can still withdraw. They can, if you do get kicked off the whitelist, or don't make it in, you simply withdraw back to the original wallet you came from. It's privacy for the good guys. And one of the paradoxes of privacy for the good guys is it means you have to have surveillance so you know who the good guys are and who they aren't. And so that's where the transaction screening comes in, and we trace back the funds and see where it came from and try to do our best to due diligence and make sure that the people going into the pool are legitimate users. And it's not like we sort of get attacked from both sides on this one, right? Like the privacy maxis are like, how dare you work for the government and introduce compliance, and you're bending the ear. Like, listen, man, I just don't want like the people who hacked my friend's DeFi protocols to be like, I don't want to exchange and, you know, privacy with them. Like, can I kick them out? Even if the government wasn't forcing me to do this, I would prefer not to, for example, share anonymity with the IRGC. And then on the other side, you know, the TradFi types are like, you have to KYC. And then we respond like, KYC systems aren't the perfect thing because they actually are more harmful to everyday citizens because professional criminals come in and have identity mules that they use. And so it's like, I don't care if you show me a valid ID if you just hacked my friend's DeFi protocol. So we're trying to do better than both systems, this middle ground that is what we think pragmatic and effective for everyday users, because people benefit from privacy, right? There's wrench attacks. You know, the Ledger founder got abducted. He got his finger chopped off.
Part of a digit of his finger, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was like with his wife too. It's horrible. So there's reasons why you don't want to necessarily reveal your entire transaction history or how much you're making with every single person you transact with on chain. And the security models of most of, you know, existing ways that people get privacy is like run your money through Coinbase are not great either, because I could bribe a support engineer at Coinbase, give him $1,000 and say, hey, what's this withdrawal address? Give me their info. Being able to use zero knowledge proofs on blockchain is actually a material upgrade. It's a new technology that unlocks a new social application, and this is shared private state, and we can now have actual private money, and we're just trying to do the extra work at Oxbow of trying to keep that for the good guys.
I think in the absence of Tornado Cash and good mixers, people have been using the centralized exchanges as mixers, which is funny because obviously it's the least private thing. That company has all the information, and those companies are all cooperating with whatever government asks them, because privacy isn't a monolith. There's privacy from who, and every different protocol or platform has a different answer to that. So there's no blanket privacy. It's like privacy from what? A nation state actor, privacy from the IRS, privacy from, so with Oxbow, who can a user expect to be private from, and who can a user expect that their information would be sent to if necessary?
As it stands, we're not necessarily doing KYC on our users who deposit. I mean, most people probably end up depositing from like a public address, but then they withdraw privately, and the withdrawals all use zero knowledge. So we don't actually necessarily know who the withdrawals belong to. So once you withdraw out of our system, there's no way that we can reveal any information about which your transactions or your withdrawals. So that's why I'm saying it's better than a centralized version of this.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned not wanting to be in the same privacy pool as a hacker. We obviously just had one of the biggest ever hacks in history with Bybit, which Lazarus claimed. Is hacking
$1.5 billion? Yeah.
Is hacking immoral? Why do you not want to be in those pools? Is it just because of government retribution, or is there some kind of other reason why you don't want to be part of that? Because there's an argument to say that code is law, and if there's a vulnerability, all right.
I mean, you could abstract this like as theft immoral. Generally speaking, yes. It's like somebody's property, you take it. It's like the basis of all society. So I would say, based on every moral system that I've heard of, hacking as a category of theft is considered immoral. We prefer the ways that people gain capital to be by creating value for others, for example. I can see that there's some amount of value in identifying weaknesses in systems. Typically like the white hat bounty on things is like 10%, right? So you keep some of it and then you reveal some of it. But if the ultimate outcome is that somehow this is going to fund like North Korean nuclear weapons programs, then that's like really bad for everybody that isn't North Korea. And so I think making it easier for them by allowing them to shield their withdrawals and have those be private and within the same context of like your mom and pop trying to get privacy from each other, or just legitimate users who don't want to necessarily be giving privacy to North Korea and getting privacy from North Korea, I think that that's a worthy goal. And I'm a user of privacy systems too, and I have some funny, use cases for this. For example, right? I donate to Iranian protesters and causes, and people give people VPNs and pay for food and different things through a nonprofit I helped start called Iran Unchained. And we have a really funny problem statement, which is like, how do we hide the money trails from the Iranian government so that the people that we're sending the money to don't get in trouble with their government, but have some sort of paper trail so that I can report, to OFAC, because NGOs are allowed to send up to $500,000 a year if they follow, certain exemptions. But that also comes with a reporting requirement. And so it's kind of this balance of privacy and, transparency, or report on this. And for those, I would love to have something like I couldn't use Tornado Cash because the U.S. sanctioned it for the whole duration that I was doing that. I had to use other privacy tools, and I'm grateful that those exist as well. And using several in conjunction is a great way to make sure that there's no necessarily like weakest link that can expose you and the users that you're trying to protect.
What are some other good privacy tools?
Well, if I told you everything I use, that would sort of defeat the purpose, right? But
you don't have to say the name necessarily, but what kinds of other technologies are being built?
Generally speaking, we're talking about, things for Ethereum, that's things like Railgun. People use like cross-chain hops into things like, Zcash, Monero, pair that with other exchanges. Sometimes, just old school privacy techniques like using proxies, Hawala network type setups where the transactions aren't necessarily, one in, one out. It's isolated. Any combination of those things can help achieve privacy.
Can you explain what the Hawala network is? I think that's just a fascinating historic example of private money.
A Hawala network is basically like an old school like money network where you might have, I'm just going to make stuff up, but somebody in India, somebody in Iran, somebody in Europe, and the guy in India says, hey, I don't have a direct connection to the guy in Europe, but I know this guy in Iran, and so I'll send him money. And so they send some money, and then that guy, and it's like a credit system too. So it's not necessarily like they're actually transferring. They say, I owe you this much, and there's some trust between these intermediaries, and so they'll say, I owe you this much, and then that guy will, send some money to the other way, and then these credit relationships sort of net out over time, and so as a result, you can, have private transactions where all I see in, if I'm on the receiving end in Europe is that some other guy in Iran sort of sent me the money.
Going back to the Ethereum roadmap questions and kind of thinking about the technical roadmap, do you think that Ethereum should have added ZK privacy at L1? Do you think that should have been part of the Ethereum technology as opposed to building on something separate?
I'm so far glad that it hasn't, because even the one app that we had, we were sort of naive when we launched it in terms of who would be, a lot of the usage of it. It's dangerous to add these things and force people to use them. One of the things that I've been saying is that freedom of association implies the freedom of dissociation. And so if we're going to add privacy to the base layer, I would also like to have the type of thing that Privacy Pools gives you, which is the ability to publicly prove that you are not some of the other participants in the system. So in addition to saying, I have this much money, like in normal Tornado Cash system, you say, look, this set of deposits, like these are the ones that we think are bad actors. Like I can prove that I'm not one of those. And then by process of elimination, those funds are more isolated. And so I think if we're going to add privacy to the base layer, we should also have this kinds of proofs of dissociation, so that it's not that I am forced to associate with the other users in order to use the system or use it privately. And so far Oxbow is one of the only. I mean, Railgun has a version of this, and it seems to be working out okay. But Oxbow is going to have a better version of this pretty soon. Difference being that they can't really remove people from their association set because it's like a whole shielded pool, whereas ours is sort of more just payments in and out, and so you can remove people from the association set without worrying about downstream, money getting tangled and then being unable to prove its origin.
You mentioned this as one of very few applications being built like this, and it's definitely rare. Among what I hear about being built tends to be much more institutional these days, and a lot of the projects are really trying to appeal to the kinds of folks that are buying ETFs toward institutional staking. What do you think of the idea that our space has kind of been captured by these big centralized institutions, and that's driving a lot of the conversation on what's being built? Do you think that is true?
It's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Like, we're all hoping that that the systems create value, but then the people who have the most value are the, Wall Street like actors who care about, staked ETFs and things like that. And those actors have none of the same cypherpunk values that we're trying to talk about, and they are used to controlling the systems that they operate in. And so I think it's still worthy to build for people who are not necessarily under their umbrella, who are not necessarily institutions. I think it's obviously worthy to build for the institutions as well. It's not like they're bad people or something for trying to deliver value for their customers. They just have different priorities. So
I'm glad you bring up cypherpunk values. There is something you tweeted, and I certainly don't want to hold you to things that you've tweeted in the past. But no, this tweet really made me think, which was, it was something about how there's no place for values anymore in late stage blockchains, in mature blockchain ecosystems. There's no more place for values. Values are over. What is the place for values at this point in what we're building, right? Because at the beginning and early in this Ethereum movement, everything was about values, cypherpunk, ideology, mission. How much of that is appropriate to preserve? Is it important that Ethereum preserve that in order to differentiate from other projects?
I want to be clear. I'm not exactly sure which tweet you're talking about. Was it recent?
I'll find it.
Was it like in the last week or so?
No, it was like a year ago. It was literally like a year ago. Long time ago. Deep cuts here.
Sure. I think that we have to temper our ideology with reality is probably the drum I'll keep beating, because the values are great to aspire to, but then we also, it's sort of like understand the principle and understand when to violate the principle. We have thus far stuck to our principles, and we should be aware of when it doesn't work, like get the results that we actually want. I don't think that Ethereum is doesn't have values or shouldn't have values necessarily. I just think that we should evolve our values. So I don't know, permissionlessness is like an interesting value, right? How does this play out in our ecosystem, right? If you build a fully permissionless privacy system, you're going to have accept the reality that criminals and bad actors are going to use it. If you add a permissionless way for people to then prove that they're not some other people, then you might have a way for some people to reclaim some of their sovereignty by freely associating with and dissociating with who they want. If you have a permissionless way for validator set, then you might accept that North Korea might validate transactions someday. And that is part of what makes this thing, credibly neutral or globally neutral. But that means you also, if you even wanted to, you can't censor their transactions. And in another world, like you could slow down the Bybit hacker. It's like you can't roll back that hack because we can't hard fork in time for the money to be reset. Where it's like, people talk about the DAO hack, and it's like the only reason we were able to do that is because there was a 30-day gap between when the money could actually leave the DAO. And like in theory, you could slow down hackers if like 99% of all validators decided that they were going to censor transactions. You could make the transactions take 100 times longer. But if they can permissionlessly join the validator set, then they might end up validating their own transactions. And so you can't do that anymore, right? And so there are trade-offs to this, and some of this might be desirable for the users of the system, and some of it might not be. And if the desirability is for this sort of like, I think Joe Lubin brings this up. It's a neutral way for rival geopolitical powers to create contracts that they can't then necessarily unilaterally break, or have money that is not, neither one of them can sort of corrupt or take over in the form of Ether itself as the underlying cryptocurrency for all this, then it's interesting to have a zone that is outside of the control of any particular political hegemon of the day, whoever it might be. And that might create value because it might allow people, countries, people to engage in kinds of agreements in that allow them to build trust and have peace. And one of the heady ideas that we had getting into Ethereum is like, maybe in the future there will be these like peace bonds, right? And like peace bonds, right? So like so like in ancient times there would be like hostage swaps where like kings would give each other their children, and this is like, we're basically depositing our kids into a 2 of 2 multi-sig, and if either one of us defect, both our kids die, right? And this is like the basis of scaling up trust. And like, if you could do this, your clan could trust the other clan, and then you guys would fight together, and then you could overpower all the other clans that didn't know how to, achieve mutual trust. And so there could be a future where like every peace treaty that doesn't have slashable peace bonds associated with it is looked on with suspicion. And the only way you can achieve something like that is if you have a neutral system with neutral money and able to neutrally enforce agreements to begin with. And so that's like the sort of, abstract value that, some of us are even thinking about as the ultimate value of something like Ethereum. Whether that's on the menu today as something that people care about or think about is, that's not like what institutions are thinking about. They're thinking about like, how do I tokenize a stock, right?
Well, let's
which is
talk
great too.
about
Like, I don't want to have to make a brokerage account, but
sure. So let's talk about the menu today. In order to do what you just described, you want to be really decentralized. You want to actually be neutral. How does Ethereum compare to things like Bitcoin and Solana and other projects in its ability to deliver against that vision, but also the institutional one?
These systems can be captured along various axes, right? So Bitcoin, we think that, I don't know, like Michael Saylor has a lot of it, the government has some of it. If the government wants, they could, the US government could seize a bunch of the Bitcoins. If they market sell all the Bitcoins in a day, maybe they set Bitcoin to zero. I could see a funny scenario where like Bitcoin is considered controlled opposition, where we, sort of America plays Bitcoin like a Ponzi scheme and plays to win. And so our game is to like hype up a bunch of other countries to think that they're escaping dollar dominance by buying a bunch of Bitcoins and then dumping on them eventually when they're like cheering on. They're like, haha, we have freed ourselves from the mighty dollar. And then, we just market sell all our Bitcoins. And that's not like we captured the mining, the Bitcoin could continue at that point. It's just that we happen to centralize a large number of the Bitcoins. And so by selling them all, we have reduced made Bitcoin no longer as relevant. compared to other blockchains, I think Solana has a bunch of data centers that run it. There's a smaller number of validators. Other blockchains aren't really even necessarily worth mentioning on this axis because they have even fewer validators. I think like Gnosis is actually one of the most decentralized, funny enough. But Ethereum has other vectors which could allow it to be captured, and that's, for example, the sheer number of US dollars that are issued on it. One of the ways that Ethereum could be captured is if the Tether and Circle gang up and say, hello, we are no longer recognizing tethers and circles on certain chains. We are creating our own hard fork. And this has a very disruptive potential because a lot of DeFi would get dragged into this. Because if there's two forks, for example, and you have on the one side the chain in which all of my dollars just went to zero, and then on the other chain you have the one that still has the dollars, then probably every DeFi app that has any type of dollars is going to have to move to the one with the dollar chain. So if you have Aave, everybody get liquidated. It'd be a huge mess on that chain. So they're going to support the dollar chain, same with Compound, same with, even like MakerDAO, obviously, because it's backed by treasury bills in large part. The only things that can sort of exist on both chains at the same time are like completely ether backed systems like LUSD and RAI. And so if we were honest as, Ethereum users about like what, do we actually value this sort of credible neutrality? Do we want to make this capture resistant? Like we would invest a lot more time and energy and capital into building coins and out of our like ether and assets that make it more decentralized. The other way is to import a lot of, I don't know, euros or renminbi or something, so that there's some mutually assured destruction scenario where like China's like, we don't want to participate in the US fork, and so now your DeFi protocol is going to get broken if it also, but like that hasn't happened yet. Like I think the more likely scenario there is you just have the China fork and the America fork, and then you have done away with any illusions of credible neutrality. So I don't think people really pay enough attention to these types of things. I think we like to say things are decentralized and incredibly neutral, and we sort of handwave. Somebody who did a good job of explaining this is Lynn Alden, one of the Bitcoiners, had a great article about this particular vector of capture by stablecoin issuers on Ethereum.
Let's talk about a different vector of capture, which is Ethereum's quote-unquote social layer. Do you think the EF has been captured by communists?
Well, Comrade Vitalik has said, make communism great again. And much to many of our dismay, he sort of didn't correct it, let it ride as a joke. It's good to be clear what we're talking about when we say captured by communists. Like, do I literally think Vitalik is a communist? Like, no. He wrote a post called Degen Communism. It was published on April Fool's. The Degen Communism part is basically a April Fool's joke. I think that was about the only part of it that was an April Fool's joke. Most of the ideas on it, I actually think Vitalik generally believes, and he likes to communicate through jokes as like a way of encryption for his memes, which is fine. Most of what people talk about when they in the thread where Vitalik said make communism great again, I'm at the top of that thread. I'm calling out like this Gitcoin guy who's just like hired by the EF, and I'm like, please don't be a Gitcoin commie. And I'm talking about like commie culture, and I'm using that as shorthand for like neo-Marxism. And I'm not talking about specifically like people running around with Communist Manifesto. I'm talking like about
actual Mao style communists or like Stalinists or Leninists.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the modern manifestation of this, which is and like egalitarian. It's egalitarianism taken like as a god, as a religion. So like far beyond its sort of deserved value. And so it's like equality in all respects as the highest value. And so the way this manifests is like, people, it's a lot of what we're kind of getting over in America right now, which is like the DEI movement, the woke movement, that really prioritize like racial diversity for the sake of racial diversity, not accounting for that actually itself being racist in some ways, because you make everything about race, and then you look at the equality, you look at the outcomes of a process, and so you say, if there's a discrepancy in the outcome, then clearly the process is racist, and you don't accept that there might be fundamental inequalities between people or genders or races or whatever, and then that creates instability. And like I wrote a post about this in 2020. I've been at this for a while. So this post I wrote was literally called "The Marxist Invasion," and it quotes a KGB agent who's a turncloak whose name is Yuri Bezmenov, explaining how he uses.
Thing. It's wild.
Amazing, right?
That whole video.
And
everyone should watch that.
Everyone should watch this because it explains that like spy stuff is not like James Bond, sneaking around. Like 95% of it is psyops, and the psyop that you want to inflict on your enemies is egalitarianism, because you get people to feel discontent with their position. It's between the haves and the have-nots. He has a whole flowchart of like how it progresses. It's like discontent, demoralizations in there, and then the society eventually like gets disrupted, and then there's becomes a more closed society. A recent blog post that I wrote about this is I wrote earlier this year, or last year, 2024. Is called "What the West Can Learn from the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979," and it has a meme on it of like the Vietnam dog where it's like freaking out watching this stuff happening, and it's the meme is like Iranians watching the Marxists and the Islamists marching together. Like if you meet Iranians in the West, because we're all running from something, and the thing we're running from is this like Marxist Islamist alliance that took over our country and resulted in the Islamic Republic and a very closed society, very authoritarian, not at all friendly to like women's rights or anything like that. And the way it happened is that the Marxists basically ran cover through the Islamists, because the Marxists were all like vehemently anti-American, what they called imperialism, and it turns out like that's not a good basis for like running your own country. And so they allied with the other people who were also anti-America. And when for example, Islamists would commit acts of terror, the Marxists, who controlled a lot of the newspapers, would blame it on the Shah. And they would spin propaganda to be whatever that went wrong was against the Shah. And so nothing was sort of enough for the Marxists. And yeah, like it actually, like I think there's like a category where it's like, do you actually consider this dangerous? And I think the reason that I bring this up is because a lot of people in Ethereum don't consider this ideology dangerous. And I like to explain the ways in which it is actually dangerous and can have adverse effects down the line. It's similar to America. It's one of those toxic ideologies where there's this idea of like this paradox of tolerance, where it's if you want to have tolerance, you actually have to be intolerant of intolerance. What ends up happening in many like Marxist infiltrated organizations is that they only hire other like Marxists or people who are ideologically aligned, because they'll say, it was rampant in universities. Just to give an example, there's like a university that had like 800 professors apply for a position. And by the time that they got to the merit part of the application, they only have 100 professors left, because the other 700 got filtered out on like DEI criteria, or like, how much do you care about diversity, or this and that. That's actually not very diverse. And it ends up taking over. And so I think in some ways, the EF, Gitcoin are two organizations that knowingly or unknowingly have some degree of this kind of ideological infiltration. And the reason that I've been calling out Vitalik for this is because I think he personally also could do a lot better at addressing this. I don't think he takes it seriously. And him joking about communism is what made me realize that the cultural problem starts at the top. He's basically normalizing, me trying to criticize it. He was saying, like, this isn't something that's worth addressing. So he was trivializing my criticisms. And I took that personally. I was very upset.
So what, in your opinion, is the way forward? Is it other groups like Etherealize springing up that have a different kind of cultural take and a different mission? Is it coming now to the EF with the changes at the executive director level? What's the ideal role here? What's the ideal outcome that you would want to see?
I think there are basically, a couple paths forward. And it's either like fix the culture at the EF or make the EF irrelevant, if you can. And so fixing the culture at the EF is hard because culture starts at the top. You literally have to convince Vitalik. If he doesn't want to be convinced, it's not happening. That said, I'm genuinely surprised and optimistic. Seeing Tomas in action has been inspiring. Tomas is one of the new co-executive directors at the Ethereum Foundation. He seems to be engaging the Ethereum community in a way that the EF historically has not been. It shows the importance of leadership. Right, the right leader can sort of wear like the Ethereum community like a mecha suit, and like get their force amplified by 1,000 times. The wrong leader might just let people run in a whole bunch of different directions and not, be able to concentrate their efforts and accomplish, like tangible results quickly and effectively. So I'm optimistic on that. I'm pessimistic in sort of the long term. I mean, maybe there's hope, but and maybe Vitalik will come around. But the other path is, very optimistic about Etherealize. So Etherealize, Danny Ryan, who a lot of us were supporting to be the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation, not because, anybody else is, not doing anything, but we just I have a unique perspective on Danny because in part of the first thing that MolochDAO ever did was publish a report about the state of Ethereum. And this was in 2019. And it identified Danny Ryan's central role as this nexus between all of the researchers and all of the client teams. And this is before he was formally declared, the sort of leader of the shipping. And so our report helped enshrine that. And when he left, nobody else stepped up to play that role. I think I was one of the first people that when he quit, I was tweeting, I was like, how long until we beg him to come back? And then we all put up Danny Ryan, his Twitter profile picture memes, just the bat signal, right? Hoping that, he might come back. And we supported him to be executive director because when you have this kind of entrenched ideological, committee-based system that kind of pushes out anybody that doesn't vibe with it, the only way out is you bring on somebody that basically has king-like powers, and they can just squash the entire hierarchy at if they see fit. But Vitalik doesn't want that. Vitalik wanted him to be a co-executive director, which is a position that Tomas is in with Xiaowei. And so he would not have full authority over personnel, and so it would not been able to fix the Ethereum Foundation culture in ways that might be necessary. At Etherealize, I think that he's going to have peers that are excellent, and this will help Ethereum create a culture of excellence. Vivek, who is the face of Etherealize, incredible. On podcasts, explaining things, Etherealize, the website, what he's been working on. So good. I'm such a big fan. And I'm so glad that he has answered the call and, taken it on himself to participate. I think, the other co-founders, Grant, who used to run the Ethereum SF meetup, is actually how I got into the space. I was going to his meetups. He was a big community builder. This was back in 2016. And so this is people who've been around for a long time, have the vision, have the resources, have the motivation, and want to see Ethereum deliver on the value. What is their motto? Bring Ethereum to the real world, bring the real world to Ethereum. And it's nice to have grounding in the real world and not necessarily the like abstract, ideas that we all came into the space with. I think it's a sign of maturity. That said, let's say Etherealize starts doing client development, and there's it's not enough to like have a client. You actually have to take over the Ethereum roadmap. There might have been things, for example, that we wanted to do earlier. Vitalik wrote a blog post month ago, said, we need to at least 10x the scalability of Ethereum from here. Okay, thank you, Vitalik. Appreciate that. We agree with you. Why did we write this now? Has it not been obvious anytime in the last 5 years that we're going to need to scale, the base layer more than 10 times? Who is accountable for this not happening until now, right? And we have a hesitation to talk about these things because we don't want to call out Vitalik directly.
Why do you think that exists? Why do you think people are so hesitant?
It's like a religious thing, it's a taboo. He's our cult leader, right? So until we can call out like Lord Voldemort, like we can't, sort of make progress. And part of it's us, right? A lot of us have idolized him. And that's a sign of immaturity on our parts, and we need to do better. We need to, be the kind of people that can think for ourselves and just do things when it makes sense in order to help him, because it's not really fair to him to put him in this position of this like demigod and then expect everything from him, and then we sort of give up our own agency in the process. And so we really need to take back our own agency and be able to participate in the decisions that make sense. And part of this, unfortunately, means that, if there's a conflict over the roadmap, for example, and then Vitalik, the demigod, is on one side, and then other people are on the other side, he just like automatically wins. Helping his crash out arc, as it be, in terms of reducing him down to a normal person who has some good ideas and some bad ideas, and being willing and able to hold him accountable, is going to help that process. And that'll give Etherealize a lot more power in determining, the fate of Ethereum. And that will mean that the culture of the EF will not be as relevant in the future.
Amen to that. I think that's a great place to wrap. Do you want to say something quickly about where people can find Oxbow and how they can get involved with it?
Thank you so much. Feel free to head to Oxbow, it's spelled 0xbow.io, and check out privacypools.com. I'm Ameen Sol on Twitter, AMEENSOL. Follow us, and look forward to seeing you all on chain.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, you name it. Check out serotonin_HQ on X, and myself, Amanda Cassett, 2 S's, 2 T's.